Hello everyone, this is the Eachine Wizard TS130. Featuring 1507 4100 kV motors, Dow 3030 props, an F4 flight controller with an OSD, originally running Betaflight 3.1.7, 20 amp 4-in-1 ESC, power switchable VTX 25 milliwatt, 100 milliwatt, and 200 milliwatt via smart audio, Foxeer Aero Pro micro camera. Mine weighs almost 142 grams. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting 135 millimeters. Single bottom plate design, that's 3 millimeters. Top plate is 2 millimeters. It comes with a plate to protect your battery, a thin gummy for your battery to lay on, 2 foam pads, these are normally for your arms, 2 carbon wrenches, an extra set of props, and a baggie full of screws. At the time of this recording, this product is $129. I flew it on this GNB 550 4S battery. As we get into this flight, a few things to cover right off the bat. So they did not have smart audio selected, and it came with, as I said in the quick roll, Betaflight 3.1.7, which my recollection is that's the same version a lot of King Kong products are coming with. So I can't quite explain why it came with such an old version. So one of the first things I did was to update Betaflight and then set up the smart audio so I could change my power and milliwatt. I am running 200 milliwatt in this flight, and you'll see at the top of those punch outs as we hit the throttle that I've got a little bit of an oscillation there, so I might need to tweak that tune, maybe add some TPA or something of that nature to remedy that high throttle oscillations. I'm not a huge fan of these props. I think they have potential to be very smooth in the middle of the throttle range, but typically I'm a big fan of the gym fan, like the 3052 props. They can be a little harder on batteries, but I just prefer how they fly a little bit. But I wanted to stick with it because we do get 2 sets of these props, and they are quite hardy props. So if you're new, then the props should last a little while at least. But I wouldn't suggest that if you're really new that you pick this one up, because there is a little bit to do with it. You need to secure the antenna. They don't do a very good job with that. Like I said, it didn't come with smart audio setup, so if you're not familiar with setting that up, that might be a challenge that you don't want to get right out of the box. And it doesn't come with a tune, and I'll put my tune on screen, but as you've already seen, my tune could have a little bit of work to do. I'd say it's about 60% there, probably. Maybe 65 if you want to be extra nice. We've got some big, powerful motors, and one of the things that surprised me about these 1507s and a pretty high kV of 4100 kV is the flight time that we're going to end up getting comes in right around 3 minutes. And as you see, I do several punch-outs. I do the power loop over the house. I'm kind of whizzing around. So I am not taking it easy on the battery by any stretch. And I get almost 3 minutes out of a little 550, and you could put up to, depending upon your space, you could probably go up to an 850 4S and really get some really good flight time. Also, I am happy that they used a nice name brand camera. Whether you're a fan or not, that's kind of up to you, but at least it's not a generic camera, so if you want to get different lenses, or if you have, you want to replace the product with exactly the same as what you got, you know what you need to go after, you can buy those various places. You can get the Foxeer Micro Aero in a lot of different locations. And while we're talking about that, you see that we've got the Foxeer readout, and I left that on screen for a couple of reasons. So the Foxeer camera has a multi-pin connector, and they actually snipped off the wires for what you need to be able to take the OSD portion of the camera off. So if you don't like that, you've got to find another connector. So again, a reason for, if you're brand new to this, you might not want to pick this one up unless you have a buddy who flies who has that connector and can help you out. So it's going to be very hard to tell, and I noticed this when I had my receiver off, but right over here there should be 2 more wires, and they are gone. So in order to change that OSD, whether you want it there or you want it at a different position, or you want to change the different things that are there, you can't do it with what comes in the box. You've got to have another connector that typically comes with the camera. So that's something that you're going to need to source yourself if you want to change it. And that's why I didn't change it in the video. Also, the battery plate that comes with it, I don't think it's going to work for a 4S battery, because I just think this, between this strap being relatively short and then trying to incorporate this would usually go, you'd weave it through here. You'd weave the strap through those slots, and this would go on the bottom of your battery. So when you landed, instead of landing on the battery, you'd be landing on the carbon, which would be next to your battery. So that's what that plate's for. But I think you're going to have a longer battery strap in order to do that. This strap works fine for the battery that I showed you, the G&B 550 4S. So if you're running a bigger battery, expect to source a different battery strap as well. These parts that hold the camera are 3D printed. So that's something to consider. I wouldn't expect them to break. You kind of get an idea of what sort of camera protection that we have. You can move the camera up and down depending upon where you want it. I moved mine up just about as far as I could with the camera angle that I wanted. And you can see that I'm pretty much touching the top. I think I backed it off just a slice from touching the top plate. I like to keep my camera isolated, so if there are vibrations, that it doesn't get through in the FPV feed. It's also worth noting that this flight stack does not use pins. They aren't interconnected, so if you chose to soft mount them yourself, you could do that. Of course, you'd have to source some different components. They did a nice thing where they run some heat shrink over here, and then you put your motor wires underneath it, so we didn't have to worry about that. My zip ties here are just for my receiver. You can see how I mounted them there. That's pretty much just how I do it, because it keeps things nice and tidy and out of the way. And if I need to put it in a box to ship it to someone for a giveaway, I don't have to take the receiver off necessarily, although I do tend to reuse them. Also, one thing that was a bit curious to me, and I'll include the video right up here, you can see where I have my antenna, and it's not tight. This is loose over here. You can see if I press on the side that the antenna wiggles a little bit. So this loop is just kind of to hold the antenna in place, and the UFL connector is over here on this side, and I just kind of loop the antenna around to keep this out of the way. So when I'm flying, I still have the antenna kind of nice and proud out here, so I can get some fairly good reception. But I did notice that on a number of flights, when I came to it, it had like a rolling screen, almost like an old TV that couldn't quite tune to the right channel to where the screen would roll, and you'd have some black bars. You see it up there, and when I would touch it, it would go away. That was quite strange to me. I've made over 400 videos, and I've never seen anything like that. So that could be very specific to my unit or how I've set them up, but it's something that I wanted to show you. You may be a fan of the blue and gray camo print, or you may not. Depends on your point of view there, but that's a view that we've got there. It does add a little bit of flavor if you're into that sort of thing. And I do believe they borrowed heavily from Kebab's floss frame. I think there was actually some discussion when the larger model came out. What was it, the 220, the Wizard 220 or 215, something of that nature, when it came out, where Eachine did acknowledge that they had taken, I believe they acknowledged, I hope they did, taken some liberties with Kebab's design, and I don't think he was terribly upset about it, but I wouldn't want to speak for him. But that's something that we have to acknowledge, is that this top was originally designed for his floss frame, so he deserves all the credit for this design. You may or may not like that. I heard a couple of people online worry about protection for your different electronic components. I don't feel very strongly one way or another. I see that if you came down at an angle at something, it can get in here and it could damage, like a rock or a bench, or I guess even trees. I guess if you got tangled up in a tree and were fall about that, that might be a concern for you. I don't think that top plate would continue through all the different floss iterations if it was a big concern, because I do believe that frame that Kebab makes is quite popular. So that's something that you're going to have to choose on whether you're comfortable with it or not. I did also add some strain relief for my battery lead, because I always do that because I crash so often and sometimes I have battery ejections. I do use Duralock here on the bottom, and I like to use that for my micro batteries because it can be a little bit fussy with straps. With this I can just stick the battery on there and it'll pretty much stay, and then I can finesse my wires because I like to keep everything pretty tight. I like to tuck my wires underneath my strap, zip them down pretty good so I don't have anything moving around while I'm in flight. So while it flies pretty good and it comes in at a pretty reasonable price, I would say that, again, if you're starting out, this one could be a bit of a challenge because it does come with a pretty old version of Betaflight. Mine did not have smart audio set up on mine, so I can show you the ports configuration tab. That's really all you have to do to set up smart audio, is select a right port, put it to the TBS smart audio, save and reboot, and you're all set, because all the wiring has been done. It's all there. Just for some reason, when they put the stack together, they didn't turn that on when they flashed the flight controller. Also, it does not come with a receiver, and it actually comes with a fairly long pigtail. It comes out of the back, and it has a servo connector on it, so you do need to be prepared to do some soldering. You cannot buy this with a receiver of your choice. You're going to have to had your own receiver. If there are concerns about components, I did see recently on Banggood's website that I do believe all the spare parts for this have already come out. I'm a little late on my review. I must also acknowledge that we stepped back in time a little bit for that flight. Some of you that follow the channel fairly closely might know that we had a pretty good snowstorm come through, about 6-7 inches of snow. And as that slowly started to melt off, then we got rain, and it's just not been very nice. So in order to get a decent flight as far as how it looked outside, I actually had to step back to the day before that snowstorm that dumped 6 inches of snow on us. I believe I've covered all the things you need to be aware of. I think if you're well versed in Betaflight and you like this model, you liked how it flies, I would say the one shortcoming that it does have is it doesn't have a beeper. So if you're familiar with, building and setting up quads and you're looking at this machine, the only thing that I can really complain about too much is it doesn't have a beeper. I think if I had to get real picky, the next thing I might talk about would be the camera protection. It's pretty good, actually. It's not terrible at all. But just like most quads, if anything comes straight at us like a tree or a flag or something of that nature, we are going to strike the camera because there is no ability to sync it back. Because we just have these standoffs or the 3D printed pieces on the standoff. Of course, if you got a 3D printer, you can go out there and look for some extensions or something of that nature. Maybe they have some different ones. These are not M3 posts. These are M2 posts. I'm uncertain about the diameter, but you can definitely design something or find a new one to get the camera back if you choose to do that. Because as you see here, we do have space between the camera connector and the flight stack in order to do that. So I believe I've listed every possible complaint I can. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.